Before we dig into hatching day preparation, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Brincy, the incubation specialist. Just last week, we successfully completed our spring hatch of cute chicks who are currently huddled up under the Brincy brooder. If you missed the hatch, head over to the Community Chickens, Mother Earth News, or Grit Facebook pages after this podcast. For thousands of years, humans have relied on poultry for their survival. For dozens of years, I've relied on chickens for strips, nuggets, and popcorn-like pieces. And now I'm here to reclaim and share some of that ancestral knowledge to better understand chickens today. Join us, the Community Chickens team, as we take you on a chicken journey of your own. We'll tell you how to raise your own birds from incubation to dinner plate. Listen as we discuss breed selection, disease treatments, nutritious feeds, cool coops, predators, and eggs. We've got it all. I'm Zach Foley, and this is Community Chickens. We are very excited to have reader mail. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, email us at communitychickens@gmail.com. We are happy to hear from you. We will answer your questions. If your name is Susie and you've been offended by any of our podcasts, we would like to hear from you. We will apologize, probably.
Maybe.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you guys if you have things to say about chickens, episode suggestions, things that we forgot to mention that you think might be important for other people to know. We would love any of those things. Hate mail, we will not accept.
We'll read it, but we won't accept it.
I'll cry at night if that's what you guys want.
So I wanted to take the moment and clear the air. I said an absolute. And you should absolutely never say anything in absolutes. So, we were discussing seasonal eggs, and I mentioned that chickens lay less during the winter, and some not at all. But I didn't say some not at all. In fact, I made it sound like all chickens will stop laying. So I apologize for that. It is different breeds, so make sure you do your research, and then you will know whether or not to expect your chickens to slow down or stop laying over winter, or they may just power through and keep laying regularly. So, sorry about that, and thank you to our readers for writing in and letting me know.
Charlotte, we accept your apology. We'll forgive you with time. So, you're welcome for my forgiveness. We want to thank our listeners for supporting the sponsors of the Community Chickens podcast. Because of your support, we are able to purchase new equipment and are looking forward to the audio quality of our next episode being improved. We've heard your complaints, we are prepared, we are listening, and we will only get better with time, as all things do. Except eggs. Don't leave them out on the counter for too long. They don't get better with time. They go rancid. Never forget. All right, today we are going to be talking about hatch day, that fateful day you wait 21 days for. You incubate, you turn your eggs, you candle your eggs, you do all the things with your eggs. You watch them. You watch them do nothing. You just sit there and think, when? Well, it's day 2. You got 19 days ahead of you. That's what I got to say to you people waiting, watching.
Didn't our office eggs hatch a little bit early? They hatched on day 19, I believe.
Yes, everyone was shocked. We were running around crazy. We didn't expect them. They all came very quickly. But today we're going to talk about maybe some eggs that don't come quickly, how long you should wait before helping a chick out of the egg, and just, lots of hatch day fun.
Yep, hatch day fun, hatch day fails.
Hashtag hatch day.
Okay, so first I wanted to talk about a video that I watched. It's from Poultry Hub Australia, and it's the chicken embryo development video. It's really cool, and I suggest watching it just so you can visualize where your chick is at in the egg, and also kind of understand how they're positioned when they start pipping, which we'll talk about in a moment. So this is something that was really complimentary to the video, and it's from backyardchickens.com, which we'll reference later. About 3 days before hatching, the embryo's head burrows beneath the right shoulder, so the beak is positioned under the wing against the 2 membranes separating the embryo from the airspace at the large end of the shell. Sometime that day, the beak pierces through the membranes into the airspace and pulmonary respiration begins. About a day later, with a dwindling oxygen supply, the embryo begins to kick, twist, and to thrust its head and beak backwards until the egg tooth pips the first hole. The chick can now draw breath. As fresh air enters the eggshell and circulates, the membranes inside begin to dry and the blood vessels within those membranes begin to shrink. The embryo continues to pip, kick, and twist. Small cracks advance counterclockwise by millimeters around the big end of the shell. A special hatching muscle on the back end of the chick's neck swells to several times its normal size with a great influx of fluid from the embryo's lymphatic system. This swelling accentuates sensory signals sent through the neck, stimulating the embryo to further activity. Eventually, the cap of the egg is cracked through. The embryo pushes it off, unfolds from the tuck, and escapes from the shell.
I'm sorry, ever since you brought up Australian chickens, I've just been thinking of Chick on the Barbie, which is, of course, a barbecue chicken. I'm so sorry. I will now refocus.
Okay.
Pippin is when your chicken is first pecking out of their egg, breaking out of their egg. It's the first little break in the shell that lets you know that they are ready. They are ready to come out.
Mm-hmm. And there is such a thing as an internal pip and an external pip. So if your chicken, if you can hear it, but you don't think it's doing anything, you can look where you think it should be pipping, where that little hole should come out. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And sometimes you can see where they've tried or started trying, and that's the internal pip where they've broken through the membrane. You can see that while you're candling.
You should also be aware that the pip should be happening on the bigger side of the egg. If your chick is trying to pip on the other side of the egg, they might be malpositioned and they will either never get out of their egg or they might need lots of help getting out of their egg, but they could come out when you do get them out. Sorry for saying out so much. They could come out with deformities because they've been malpositioned in the egg, which could be caused by improper turning during incubation. So when you're pipping, just be aware that they should be on the bigger, rounder side of the egg and not the smaller, pointy side of the egg, because that could lead to bad things.
Mm-hmm. So first the chick pips, and then it unzips. So basically it's going to make its little hole, and that's where it's going to start breathing out of, and it will start the process of pecking the rest of the way around in a circle, and eventually it will push off with its head and kind of pop out of the egg. That's where they usually fall over. They pop out, they have the egg on top of their head, and then they flop over and then rest.
My favorite part of this whole process is all of the sleeping that they do. They'll pip out, and then they'll be so tired from pipping out, they'll go to sleep for a while, and then they'll wake up and maybe pip some more, pip through the outer shell instead of just the membrane, or maybe they'll unzip their egg, and then they'll be so tired they will go to sleep again, which is how I would like to have my work day. Do a little bit, get real tired, go to sleep. Do a little bit more, go back to sleep.
Can I tell you a sad story?
Oh. Is it about sleeping chickens?
Yeah, I guess so. So, when I was little, we had killdeer, which are a type of bird, and they pretend that their wing is broken to distract from their nest. Well, they pretended too well, and my dogs got them from the parents. So I found the eggs. I kind of knew around about where they were, and I incubated them on a hot pad.
Oh.
And one of them hatched. So that was amazing, but I didn't know what was going on, and I tried to help it. So we're going to warn you several times in this podcast not to help your chicks. Because in this case, I tried to help it. Its yolk sac had not been absorbed yet, and it died.
Thank you for asking permission to tell that story. I should have told you no. But, thank you for the warning to all of our listeners. I guess also a warning to not incubate eggs on a hot pad.
Well, when you're less than 10, I don't remember how old I was. I think my parents were like, well, those are just going to be some rotten eggs, but have your fun. And then they're like, oh my God, one of them's actually hatching.
My parents would not have let me have fun with rotten eggs.
Well, grow up country.
Grow up country. Okay, so after your chicken has pipped and napped and unzipped and napped some more, you'll want to leave them in the incubator for a little bit just because you want them to dry off, fluff up, get real cute, real pretty, your little chicks. You can remove the eggs from the incubator or the shells just so that they have more room to roam and dry.
Yeah. You do want to make sure that when you're removing things that you're constantly checking the humidity. You need the humidity to be up so that they can successfully break through their shells. What can happen sometimes is the membrane will start drying. So you'll need to be aware of that and check it. What some people recommend is putting moist paper towels in there, or even moistening the membrane itself with a Q-tip that's a little bit wet. But that way the membrane stays moist and they can still tear through it as they are energetic enough. So overall, it could take your chick more than 24 hours to hatch. So you really want to be patient. I mean, be patient, be patient, be patient.
Yes, you want to be patient because they could still be absorbing the yolk, and the chick needs to take some time to really separate from its home for the last 3 weeks. So it's also absorbing blood at this time. If you want some tips for a successful hatch day, Jennifer Sartell has written a piece on community chickens. It's called 9 Tips for a Successful Hatch Day, and we've been referencing and will reference that piece a little more in this podcast. It'll be in the show notes.
So since I mentioned be patient, be patient, be patient, number 5, be patient. It might be tempting to open the incubator and assist the chick from its shell, but there's a reason hatching takes as long as it does. Within the time frame of the slow and tedious hatch, things are developing within the chick's body. The last bits of blood are being absorbed from the outer veins. The last of the yolk is being absorbed, and the chick needs to take time to separate itself from the eggshells home.
Yes, and then the next tip on Jennifer's list is let them dry, which we've already talked about just a little bit. She also recommends that you separate your newborns. So once you're ready to take your chicks out of the incubator and put them into a brooder, you want to make sure that they're still separate from like your chicks that are maybe a week or 2 old, just because you don't want your older chicks to quote unquote bully your newborn chicks, peck them down. They're not walking great yet. You don't want them to like be attacked by the bigger chicks, basically. So if you do have to put them in like the same breeder box as your smaller chicks, you could try putting them in a shoebox so that they can't get out and run with the other chicks, or put a wall between them by chance. But yeah, you just want to make sure that they're not interacting with some older chicks that might be mean. You know, like when you're 11 years old, you want to hang out with those cool 15-year-olds, but those cool 15-year-olds are only going to push you down and make you cry.
Personal experience?
No, I was always really cool.
Oh, okay. At that point, you're going to want to dip their beaks in water. You are taking the role as mama hen, and so you're going to make sure that they know where the food and where the water is. So dip their beak in the water, dip their beak in the food, make sure you're gentle, but make sure that they understand what's going on, and then just make sure that they're actually drinking and eating. Be really comfortable knowing that they are, so that you don't accidentally have one that isn't eating or drinking and starves or dehydrates.
And you'll have to do that for a while until your chick realizes, gets in the routine, and is ready to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm. So it could be like a few times a day.
And then the next tip on Jennifer's list is imprinting. Because you are basically their new mom, you want to make sure you are available to be around and be seen so that they feel comfortable and safe around you. And, you know, you were spending all that time while they were incubating, just watching them, being there while they were doing nothing. Now they're here, they're doing something, you should be there even more. So just make sure you are imprinted on your newly hatched chicks. It's very important because they don't have a mama hen around. You are now a chicken. It is you the chicken.
Yeah. So
I think that should be the title of this episode. It won't be, but don't say I didn't give my input.
Thank you.
Now a note on today's sponsor, Brinsea, Incubation Specialists. A clean environment is one of the key components to ensuring a successful hatch, and Brinsea incubators incorporate Biomaster antimicrobial protection to protect your hatch. Because Biomaster embeds silver ions into the plastic itself, it is an effective and safe way to reduce the risk of contamination in your incubator. Okay, now that we've talked about some good hatch day results, some things you should do on a good hatch day, we're going to talk about some reasons for a poor hatch rate and some things you can do if things aren't going so great, or reasons why things might not have gone great. So these top 5 reasons are from The Self-Sufficient Home, so shout out to them. The first reason is eggs were infertile, old, or improperly handled before hatch. So like I was talking about at the beginning of this podcast, some things get better with age, not eggs. You should always try, or you should, incubate eggs within the first week after they are laid. You can mark those with a pencil if they are your own eggs. You don't want to use a felt-tipped marker because it will leach into the eggshell. But if you're getting eggs from a hatchery or somewhere else, you might not know how fresh they are. So I guess trial and error. You try them, you find out none of your eggs hatch, you bought bad eggs. Mm-hmm. And never, ever try to hatch eggs from your grocery store. Those will always be old and infertile because they're for eating. All right, the second reason why you might have had a poor hatch rate is that temperatures were too low, too high, or unstable during the hatch. So you really want to monitor this, make sure that everything is going all right. We talked about before in a previous episode how long your incubator can sit during perhaps a power outage, but you always want to be monitoring the temperatures, because if it is too high, too low, or it just goes crazy, your incubator's broken, things aren't going to go great on hatch day.
Mm-hmm. Well, for an example, our chicks hatched 2 days early in the office, and when you looked at the temperature controls, it was just a little bit higher than it should have, which can be something that happens. So it's really important to document all of that so you can go back and figure out what went wrong or what went right.
All right. The third reason why is that your humidity levels were too high or too low. So similar to temperature, you want to be watching those, because if you get it wrong, it could lead to disaster. Mm-hmm. Maybe not disaster, but if you wanted chickens, you're not going to get chickens, and that to some could be a disaster. All right. And then the next one, number 4, for those of us keeping track, was that the eggs were not turned often enough, resulting in leg deformities, which is so sad. It makes me so sad. Everyone knows I love a sad chick. So turn your eggs right, guys. God.
And then left. But then right again. And then left again.
I meant turn your eggs correctly.
Okay.
Thank you, Charlotte, for the jokes.
You're welcome.
All right. And then number 5, our final reason, is that your incubator was opened while the chicks were hatching. You got to give them time. You got to let them do their thing. Mm-hmm. As Charlotte has said, and as we will touch on again in a moment, helping your chick out of the egg is your last resort. You want to be really sure that they can't get out by themselves before you help them. It could take them over 24 hours, but don't open the incubator after 2 hours after they pip out because you're worried that they can't get out. Just give them a second.
Yep, keep giving them time. Okay, so if the eggs don't hatch and you're sure that they're not going to, time to try and figure out what went wrong. So again, taking records is very important, but you can also just kind of do an autopsy or a biopsy. Would it be a biopsy? So actually, you can just go outside. Always go outside. Don't do this in your house.
Please go outside.
Yes.
If you love your family, you will go outside.
You will go outside and you will break the egg open and try and figure out what happened there. So, if an egg looks old and runny with no embryo inside, it was probably infertile from the start. Hopefully you can catch that with candling, but sometimes you don't, and that's probably what happened.
And if you got your eggs from, I don't know, someone named Susie, and they're all infertile, you go to her, and you get very upset.
It could also be that they were kept too long or stored at temperatures that were too high or too cold before incubation. If you find embryos that stop developing at different stages, it's likely that the temperature in the incubator had too many ups and downs, or that the humidity trays dried out at several times. So that's something to keep in mind what I'm reading out of that is that the humidity tray might dry out, but maybe once. Don't throw all your eggs out. If it's several times, well, still don't throw all your eggs out, but it's more likely that you're going to have issues. So just try and be diligent. If the chick was fully formed and never broke out of the shell, the humidity or the temperature probably dropped too low and the chick died. If the humidity was too high from day 1 through 18, the chick may have drowned during hatch. Oh, that's awful.
I'm very sad. Thank you, Charlotte.
The egg whites need to dry out a certain amount so that the air space is large enough for the chick to breathe as it pips through the shell. If the chick pipped through the shell but didn't progress past this point, the humidity or temperatures might have dropped too low. The chick may have had a deformity, possibly caused by improper turning.
All right. So those are some reasons why your eggs aren't hatching. So it's not just about being diligent on hatch day and making sure you do everything right on hatch day. It really is about everything you do, even from the time you get the eggs, to make sure you incubate them in time, make sure they are at the right temperature, make sure they are turned correctly. It's just a culmination of all of your efforts. But if one thing goes a little bit wrong, then your hatch day might go a lot wrong.
Mm-hmm. So next we have the step-by-step guide to assisted hatching from backyardchickens.com.
And our friends at backyardchickens.com have said in this post, if you click on the show notes, you can read the whole thing. Please read the whole thing before you attempt to help your chicken out of its egg. Don't just listen to us and then think you are ready and prepared to pull your chicken out. There are some nuances, some tips, some other things that you just might need to know that we aren't going to say. So
do your research. I mean, this can be scary, and we're kind of making it scary, but rightfully so, because it's a little life that we're trying to create by incubating eggs in the first place. So we want to get everything right as we can. It's very rare that all of the eggs hatch. In our office the other day, they did, and we were lucky. But you just kind of have to expect some failures, but minimize those the best that you can.
The last 23 years have set me up to expect some failures.
Aww.
Sorry, guys, that got real depressing real fast. All right, so back to chickens. Me and Charlotte will cry together later. Okay. Before you start helping your chicken, you're going to want to examine the egg. Mm-hmm. So if you candle the egg and see an internal pip and you can hear the chick chirping, but you don't see movement, you should place the chick back in the incubator and wait. The egg does not need assisting at this point. So you might think, well, this egg should be hatching, but maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it's going to take a little while longer. There's nothing wrong with that egg just yet. But you might need to help if you hear chirping, but see no internal pip.
So they haven't been able to break through the membrane.
Yep.
So that's when you have your kindling device out and you try and look for where the pip should be, which should be at the fat end of the egg, not at the very end. How would you describe that? Like an inch from it?
Yeah, I'd say.
An inch from the end of the egg.
So you'll want to figure out where the pip should be, and I would definitely recommend heading over to the Backyard Chickens website and reading this article, because there's lots of photos in it that really prepare you and show you exactly where it needs to be. But you will begin by making a small hole where the pip should be, or closest to where you can hear your chick chirping.
And be very gentle and very careful, because you don't want to hurt your chick while you're trying to assist it, which is really the worst thing about assisting a hatch, is that it's so easy for something to go wrong. It's really just one of those things where things could go wrong if you don't help. Things could go wrong if you do help. It's just a really sticky situation. So it's best to be the most prepared and educate yourself before you have to go through one of these experiences. And hopefully you won't have to. Hopefully your chicks will hatch and you'll be just fine.
And it's also important to remember that even if you do help your chick out of their shell and you are successful in getting them out, there might still be something wrong with the chick.
Mm-hmm.
It might still be deformed. It might have other underlying problems, which are the reason that it couldn't get out of the shell by itself. So you also have to weigh whether or not it is worth it to try to get them out of the shell if they are not properly equipped for life.
Mm-hmm.
So after you have made your small hole in the eggshell, you will want to use tweezers and pull the white outer membrane away just a tad until you can see the baby chick's beak. So there is an outer white membrane and an inner membrane, and it is important to avoid tearing the heavily vesseled inner membrane to avoid a bleed in your chick. This isn't a problem if the blood and yolk has already been absorbed by your little baby chick. So you just want to make a small hole in the egg and then a small hole in the outer membrane right where the chick's beak is.
Good. Another time when you should help could be if the chick is having trouble and if it gets stuck for several hours in the middle of the unzipping stage. So it started poking little holes and now for some reason it can't and it's unable to kick free. So also if the pipping looks erratic or irregular, it could be in trouble. Really, anything past 40 hours, you'll probably do less damage than is happening by trying to assist the chick. But again, we highly encourage you to check out the backyardchickens.com website, and we'll have a link to that. And they really go in depth with different things that can go wrong and how you can help your chick if it is experiencing any of these troubles. There's a ton of examples. It's fairly well written. Lots of big fonts. That's my only critique. Lots of big fonts.
But as Charlotte said, it could take, or you could wait up to 40 hours before you start helping your chick. So you could think, oh, yes, it is hatch day, but that could turn into hatch days. So it's just important to remember that you've already waited 21 days for your chicks to hatch. So just maybe give them a little bit more time, and eventually you might need to help, but you also might just have been too impatient.
Mm-hmm.
They might still make it out on their own.
And it's always great to be hopeful. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm being really a Debbie Downer, but I just want everyone to be prepared if you are helping your chick that it could be deformed and it might not make it and it might already have died. For me, I think the worst scenario would be that it doesn't make it after I help it, because then I would just feel awful and think that I had done something that caused it, and it's really not a good way to find that out.
Wow, Charlotte, you're really bringing the sadness to this episode.
I'm sorry. I just want people to be prepared and not get overzealous. Is that the word I want? Overzealous. Yep. And try and hatch a chick that doesn't need their help.
A good quote from the story guide to hatching chicks is that if the chick is not equipped to get out of its own shell, it will not be equipped to deal properly with life thereafter, which is something to keep in mind. You might think that because the chick has developed so far and that it is fully developed in the egg, that it's fully developed and ready for life, but that might not be the case.
Okay, let's find something more upbeat to talk about. Got anything?
Charlotte's tired of the sadness.
I have another downer story if you'd like to hear that. I mean, we can just really go all out.
Keep that to yourself.
There'll be a link titled Downer Story in the show notes.
Another depressing quote from the story guide to chickens is that allowing substandard birds to survive and be bred from in the future does nothing apart from weaken the overall gene pool and ultimately harm the breed. So,
dang, story.
Yeah, story really coming through with the sadness. I mean, if you're hatching birds to breed, especially heritage breed birds, you're not necessarily going to want birds that struggle to get out of their shell, birds that are deformed, birds that have underlying health conditions. As sad as it is to say, those just aren't the birds that you want. Sorry, Charlotte.
You let me down.
But I think we've covered a lot of really great stuff today. You've got your happiness at the beginning. You've got your good hatch day where you're leaving your chicks in the incubator, letting them fluff up, get real yellow, get real cute, moving them to the brooder, which we will be talking about in the next episode, brooding. But then you also have things that could go wrong with your eggs. They could be infertile. You could be feuding with your dear friend Susie for selling you grocery store eggs. I don't know. You could also have mismanaged the temperature or the humidity in your incubator. That could have also gone wrong. We've also maybe scared some people, and maybe rightfully so, about helping chicks out of their eggs at the end of this episode. But we really do suggest that you read that in-depth post from Backyard Chickens. It's an incredible resource. Lots of photos, lots of real-life experience. Yeah, so I feel like this episode has been balanced, maybe a little sadder than other episodes, but maybe we'll bring the joy back next week when we're talking about that nice, warm broody box, which is basically a trip to Florida for your chickens.
Yeah, that already makes me feel better thinking of the little chicks running around and being adorable and their nice little brooder. So,
we will sign off for this week, but be prepared next week. We're coming back at you with brooding, which I will hopefully vote to call Chicks in Florida, which will not happen. I will be outvoted, but guys, I'm always here to give my opinion.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on Community Chickens. Our podcast editorial team consists of myself, Zach Foley, Charlotte Brunin, Haley Casey, and Jessica Mitchell. Music by Jason Shaw and the Coal Miners. Community Chickens is a production of Ogden Publications. Like us on Facebook, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and share us with your friends who may also love chickens. Or nuggets. Before we say goodbye, we want to take one last opportunity to say thank you to our partner, Brincy, the incubation specialist. Learn more about their incubator technology, including Biomaster antimicrobial additives, online at brincy.com. That's BRINSEA.com.